I'm going to read two passages of Scripture. Firstly, some verses from Revelation 21, and then secondly from Esther chapter 2. If you'd like just to listen, that is good. If you'd like to follow with us, please turn to Revelation 21 and Esther 2. Revelation 21 and verse 1. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then he who sat on the throne Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls filled with the seven last plagues came to me and talked with me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And let's turn over to Esther chapter 2. Esther chapter 2 and verse 1. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of the kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan, the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was, when the king's command and decree were heard, And when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, that Esther also was taken to the king's palace, into the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favour, so he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of women. Esther had not revealed her people or kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go into King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months' preparation, according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation apportioned, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters in the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaggaz, the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go into the king again, unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go into the king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favour in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favour in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. Imagine for a moment a ship caught in a strong current. Whatever efforts the crew exert, that ship is not turning. It will go where the current takes it. Does life in our society ever feel like that? Does it ever feel like being pulled along with little control or influence? A sense of powerlessness, a sense of weakness. What should we do in a world that sometimes seems to be running in the wrong direction and trying its best to pull us along with it? These are questions to consider this evening as we return to the book of Esther. It's been a few weeks, but we've begun this series by reflecting on the upside-down nature of life in ancient Persia, the folly of the world, how bizarre and absurd it may have felt for the Israelites in exile. Esther is a book of history, but it's a selective and stylized history. The details included and emphasized are meant to make points. They're meant to teach how to live in this fallen world. So this evening our aim is not to learn history, but rather to contemplate how to think and live in this fallen world. As we do that, we'll have 3 headings. First, amidst the currents of our fallen world. Second, remember God. And third, seek first his kingdom. So firstly, let's consider life amidst the currents of our fallen world. Life amidst the currents of our fallen world. What's it like to live amidst the currents, the pressures, the ups and downs of a fallen world? What's likely to fill our minds here? What should fill our minds? Chapter 1 of Esther began in the 3rd year of Ahasuerus' reign, mentioned in verse 3, and chapter 2 will reach his 7th year. So, that after these things, in chapter 2 verse 1, that covers around 2.5 years. Ahasuerus is likely the man secular history calls Xerxes, that was his Greek name. According to history, Xerxes spent those 2.5 years losing wars against the Greeks. And many in Susa would have been talking about this. These defeats were serious. Xerxes may have won the legendary Battle of Thermopylae, but he did so at great cost. And overall, his expedition was a costly failure. Major events in the world, and the Bible just says, after these things. Similar to Jesus in the Gospels, where he says, you will hear of wars and rumours of wars, but the end is not yet. And I think there's a subtle challenge here. If something is far beyond your control, don't spend all your time and effort on it, however big it is, however all-consuming it may feel. Major Persian losses in the Greco-Persian Wars, and the Bible just says, after these things. So what happened after? Well, Ahasuerus wants a new queen. Did he regret his treatment of Vashti, or did he just want a replacement? The text doesn't tell us. But rather we go straight to his bizarre and abhorrent method of finding a new queen. The suggestion, verse 2, of his personal attendants, probably his servant boys. Striking that, as happens repeatedly in this book, Ahasuerus does little by himself. It's always someone else's idea. His supreme authority is deployed at the whim of whoever happens to be standing by him. His power sweeps others before him. And yet he doesn't control it himself. All are swept around in the currents of our fallen world. At the word of a servant boy, beautiful girls from across the empire were gathered for a bizarre and immoral contest to choose the new queen. It was bizarre in many ways. A king would normally marry a noblewoman to form some sort of beneficial alliance. Maybe he was trying to put the nobles in their place by choosing a commoner. Whatever the case, it's also worth saying the plan, whilst bizarre and wicked, was not unusually wicked for its time. Haggai, verse 3, the man who's going to supervise the gathered women is a eunuch. Someone castrated, then trained as a court official. According to secular history, under Xerxes, who we believe is Ahasuerus, 500 young men were gathered and castrated each year to be trained as court officials. This was a brutal society. The king considered his people to be his property, their bodies his to use at will. A brutal society of powerful currents sweeping people along. That brutal world is our backdrop as Esther and Mordecai are introduced in verses 5 to 8. For some time, Mordecai has been raising his orphaned cousin Hadassah. They are Jews of the tribe of Benjamin, and Mordecai is the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, son of Kish. And was it Mordecai himself, or his great-grandfather Kish, or perhaps simply his family that was deported with Jehoiakim 100 years earlier? There's a couple of different ways we can translate the text. Whatever the specifics, the family's been in first Babylon and now Persia for a long time. But they remember who they are. They are Jews of the tribe of Benjamin. They remember who they are, but perhaps they keep it quiet. Mordecai is a Persian name. And whilst Hadassah is a Jewish name, she also goes by the Persian name Esther. Is there a hint there in those names of discomfort, a hint of living double lives perhaps? Whatever their lives were like, they were suddenly upended in verse 8. Esther is rounded up with other young women to be taken to the king. Now the Bible gives little detail of how this happened. Were some of the women willing to be taken, keen for the chance of being the new queen, doing all they could to stand out and be the one chosen? Were they horrified, dragged in, kicking and screaming? We don't know. We're not told. Being in the king's harem, Esther would have to break God's law. Keeping her identity secret, verse 10, it would have meant breaking the Jewish food laws. It may have meant participating in pagan worship, or at least not objecting to it too strongly. And spending a night with Ahasuerus before they were married, and marrying him, an unbeliever, a pagan. This was against God's law. But did she have any choice? Was it comply or die? Did Mordecai have her hide her identity to avoid danger? Perhaps there was some ongoing prejudice against the Jews and he was worried she'd be killed. We don't actually know for sure. The text says little about Esther's attitude to all these things. Yes, she complied. Hegai was pleased with her, verse 9. Ahasuerus was pleased with her, verse 17. But was she pleased? In verse 6, her family had been carried into exile, perhaps before she was born. Now in verse 8, she's taken into the harem. These things happened to her and her family. She is swept along by the currents of the fallen world. She's in a crazy and awful situation, and crazy and awful things happen. Ahasuerus' actions here are extremely evil. But our question this evening is not what penalty should he face for his sins, but how should we live amidst the currents of our fallen world? Were Mordecai and Esther given time to prepare? Did Esther volunteer for this because she hoped to accomplish some good? Did soldiers arrive in the night and drag her away with no warning? Could they form a plan? Was Mordecai's pacing back and forth, verse 11, was that something planned between them? Or was it his desperate hope to hear about how she was doing? We don't know. Whatever the case, their lives had been upended. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, so much is uncertain. Did they respond in the best way to these events? Maybe. Who knows? Now, our lives, likewise, can be upended in many ways. You might make a tragic mistake. Someone might mistreat you in some horrific way. Perhaps there will be a sickness, an accident, a sudden challenge to stand for truth. Will you get it right in that moment? Will you have the answer? Will you be prepared? Will there be a clear right choice? We should try to be ready. But will we be ready? Maybe. Who knows? This is still a fallen world. Our modern society is a mess too. When we have to make decisions, we must be careful how much we trust the world's advice. A modern culture would join us in condemning Ahasuerus, but that same culture's number one cause of death is the deliberate killing of unborn infants. And it may be coming to an end, but for several years now our modern culture has even celebrated the chemical castration of confused teenagers. Our society rails against tyranny and oppression whilst rejoicing in death and seemingly hating life. And these things can change so fast. Some things that our society celebrates today would have been almost unthinkable 12 years ago. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, who knows what will happen tomorrow? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, what will you be asked to do tomorrow? What will you face tomorrow? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, will you get it right? Maybe. Who knows? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, what should we do? We should remember God. This is our second, briefer and more positive point. Remember God. God's not mentioned in our text. He's not mentioned in Esther at all. But this isn't like not mentioning Ahasuerus' military failures. This is scripture, it's God's book. We know we should think of him as we read it. So why isn't he mentioned? I think the point is that amidst the currents of our fallen world, God may have felt absent to the Jews in exile. He may have felt absent to Esther and Mordecai. They may have been crying out, God, where are you when this is happening? Why is it like this? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, God may feel absent to us. We may be asking, God, where are you as we're being carried away? God, where are you when I don't know what to do? God, where are you as I'm swept along by these shifting currents? God, where are you? Where is he? He is right there with you. Remember those verses that we read at the start of the service? They're from Psalm 73. If you are trusting in him, then however things may feel, Psalm 73, verse 23, he is always with you. He is holding you by your right hand. He is guiding you with his counsel. And whatever you're going through, Psalm 73, verse 24, he is leading you to the place where he will receive you into glory. I believe there are several hints of his grace and providence scattered through our passage. And scattered through the book of Esther, in fact. But as the book of Esther proceeds, we'll see Mordecai and Esther as heroes. Where do they come from, though? They're from the tribe of Benjamin. If you know your Old Testament history, that's the tribe of the failed King Saul. They're descended from a man named Kish, the name of King Saul's father. It's not the same Kish. Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that they're descended from a Benjamite named Shimei, the name of a man of Saul's house who disgraced himself by cursing King David? In 1 Samuel 15, King Saul was rejected by God for not killing Agag. Here in Esther, as we read on, we'll find God graciously enabling Esther and Mordecai from Saul's tribe to stand against Haman, who is introduced in chapter 3 as an Agagite, some relative of that Agag whom Saul failed to kill. The tribe of Benjamin was shamed by Saul's failure. In Esther, God graciously uses a strange sequence of events to restore their honour. Saul's failure is not the last note in the history of Benjamin, because God is gracious. Whatever has happened, however much things might have seemed to have gone wrong for you or your family, however much you think you failed, remember God. Remember God's grace amidst the currents of our fallen world, amidst the shame of failure. Remember God's grace. Another memory of Israel's past that Esther alludes to is Joseph's time in Egypt. If you know the story of Joseph, he was taken and sold as a slave, but the Lord caused his master to be pleased with him. And after he was falsely accused of a crime, the Lord elevated him in prison and then in Pharaoh's palace. And in God's providence, he was able to do a lot of good. Similarly here, Esther is brought in as a concubine, much like a slave, but pleases everyone. Receives a very high status, and later in the book is able to do incredible good. Can we see the hand of God in this? Can we hear echoes of the same Lord who worked in Joseph's life, working here in a similar way? Joseph was swept along in currents he didn't understand, sold as a slave. But the hidden hand of God's providence guided him and helped him. Esther is swept along in currents she may not have understood, but the hidden hand of God's providence guided her and helped her. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, amidst the confusion of events we don't understand, remember God's providence. I believe Esther also echoes Sarah, Abraham's wife. In Genesis 12, Sarah, whose name in Hebrew means princess, hides her identity, pretending to be Abraham's sister, not his wife, and she's taken into Pharaoh's palace. God intervenes and she's brought out again. The same happened in Genesis 20. Sarah hides her identity and is taken into Abimelech's palace. Again, God intervened and she was brought out again. Esther hides her identity and is taken into Ahasuerus' palace. But the outcome is different. Began the same way, and the different outcome is jarring. You know God could intervene. He could bring her out, but he doesn't. So there's a question. What should we do when God doesn't do what we expect and hope for? When things don't go the way we want? I think this echo of Sarah prompts us to remember the wider context of her life and Abraham and God's promise to bless the world through their offspring. The Jewish people were the vehicle through which God had promised to bless the world, the people from whom the Messiah would come. He had made his promises long ago. There were so many proofs over Israel's history that God keeps his word. For Esther, if she remembered God, she may have thought, yes, I'm like Sarah. God could have intervened and rescued me from here, but he hasn't. He must have some other good plan. Similarly for us, whatever we're going through, whatever you're going through amidst the currents of our fallen world, let's remember God's promises. Remember particularly the love he has displayed in the life of Jesus, that Messiah who was promised long ago to Sarah and Abraham, that Messiah Esther was still waiting for, that Messiah who has now come and who has lived for us, who has died for us and risen, that we can be sure of forgiveness and eternal delight in his presence. Whatever you're facing in your life, whatever you're going to face in the future, the situations you have to deal with amidst the currents of our fallen world, the many things that you might have no control over, things that might be awful. Perhaps you have no idea what to do. But there's hope in remembering God's promises. Whether it seems to be going well or badly at the moment, whether you're handling things well or getting everything wrong, there is hope as you remember God. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, let's remember God. Remember his promises, remember his grace and love. God did not intervene to bring Esther out of Ahasuerus' palace. He left her there, and she became a queen, and good came of that. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, sometimes God leaves us in awful places for a time. But remember his promises, remember his grace and his love. He will bring good at the right time. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, remember God. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, remember God. And our last point, seek first his kingdom. Seek first his kingdom. And to think for a moment about the time taken preparing these young women to spend a night with Ahasuerus. We read in verse 12, each young woman's turn came to go into King Ahasuerus after she completed 12 months' preparation according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation apportioned, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. To quote Joseph Hall, a commentator from a few centuries ago, what strange preparation was here for the impure bed of a heathen. Think how much effort was taken to prepare for sin. No expense was spared in idolising Ahasuerus. Back when we looked at Esther chapter 1, we considered how, in view of Isaiah, Jeremiah and Ezekiel and the way Israel was often described as God's unfaithful or disobedient bride, Vashti's disobedience and banishment could be a challenge to God's people, a challenge to consider their own sin. As you look at the world around you, as you see all that is wrong, look first to the sin within. Vashti was banished from Ahasuerus' presence for her disobedience. Why was Israel in exile? Why had they been banished? Because they had been disobedient. They had sinned. Not against a sinful man like Ahasuerus, but against that perfect, good God. With that thought in mind, as we consider the absurd expense taken, the excessive preparations for the impure bed of Ahasuerus, we should ask, do we put such effort into purifying our souls for God? If marriage is a picture of God's relationship with his people, if we, the church, are the bride of Christ, the wife of the Lamb, are we preparing ourselves for Christ with anything like the effort that these girls were prepared for Ahasuerus? A year devoted to preparation for many, and only one will be chosen. Surely, to be the bride of Christ is worth more than that. What effort do you give to prayer? What effort do you give to cutting out sin in your life? What effort do you give to growing in love? What effort do you give to preparing to be with Christ? In verse 18, after the ordeal she's been through, Esther is crowned queen and a banquet is held in her honour. A good moment, but brief and flawed in so many ways. How much greater is the delight we have to look forward to with Christ? That great banquet, the wedding feast of the Lamb that we await. How much focus, how much care do you give to preparing yourself for Christ? Preparing yourself to live in God's kingdom for eternity. Jesus said to those worried about food, drink and clothing, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Of course, he's not saying don't bother buying food, don't bother getting dressed. But where's your mental energy? What's your priority? Are you preparing your heart for Christ by seeking every day to grow in the fruit of the Spirit? By pouring yourself out in prayer? The Lord Jesus Christ gave us all that he is as he came into this world to live for us and even to die for us. Yes, he gives us himself as a free gift. We receive it with empty hands. We say, nothing in my hands I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. And yet, as Christ gives us all of himself, do we strive to give him all of ourselves? Is your hope set on Christ? Are you seeking him first? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, you will never be good enough. You will never get everything right. If you're living for this life, it's going to let you down. If your hope is set on your own efforts and your own strength, you will fail. Your work at preparing yourself for Christ will never be enough. If your ultimate joy is something from this world, it's going to let you down. Amidst the currents of our fallen world, who knows what will happen tomorrow? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, what will you be asked to do tomorrow? What will you face tomorrow? Will you get it right? Maybe. Who knows? Remember God, the one who always gets it right. And whether for the first time or for the 100th time, put your hope in him. Set your heart on him. If you trust in Christ, he will be enough. He will take you by the hand and lead you through the current of our fallen world and bring you safely through to be with him forever. If you're not trusting Christ, if you're living for something else, if you're just not thinking about it, come to him, seek him. He's the only place where you will find lasting contentment, lasting joy, safety and security. For the first time or 100th time, turn from all else to trust in him. And Christian, as you trust Christ, as you know what he's worth and what you have in him, is he your priority? However badly things may seem to go this week, this month, even this year, Jesus will never fail you. He will never disappoint you or leave you to despair. So seek him first. Let him be the top focus of your mind. Put the best of your energy into preparing yourself for that heavenly marriage. If marriage is a picture of God's relationship with his people, if we, the church, are the bride of Christ, are we preparing ourselves for Christ with anything like the effort that those poor girls were prepared for Ahasuerus? Amidst the currents of our fallen world, remember God and seek first his kingdom.